Hello there. Welcome back to another installment of our sermon preview videos. This is an opportunity to get a preview, a heads up, on this weekend's message that I'll be sharing across all our different worship opportunities. We've been looking at the stories of King David, and this weekend we arrive at 2 Samuel chapter 11, which is one of the tragic stories of David. It's most famously known as the story of David and Bathsheba. There's a lot to the story and a lot that I'll be covering in the message this weekend, and a lot of things that we ought to think about very deeply that this scripture passage lifts up, and some of it just begins to lift up. So I invite you to continue the conversation around these items and around these issues in your own thoughts, in your own thinking, in your own reflection upon 2 Samuel 11 by commenting in the video below, or by joining us for worship and listening to more of the message this weekend. There are just a couple things I want to lift up. One is that God warned Israel when they first said, "We want an earthly king." God warned Israel that wanting an earthly king was a rejection of God and the ways of God, and that desire for an earthly king would lead them to a place where they would see and experience the abuses of power, that the king would take their daughters and would cause the loss of their sons in battle. And even David, in his greatness, in his kingship over the golden age of Israel, is not immune from the corrupting influence of power and from being part in these losses. David is in Jerusalem. He should be out on the front line, but he has already chosen to preserve his own life at the cost of the lives of his men. And so he's not out on the front line. He's back safe at home. And this opens the door for him to see Bathsheba, the wife of one of his elite bodyguards, Uriah the Hittite, bathing on a nearby rooftop. Now, let me say, friends, with all clarity and sincerity, that any telling of the story that demonizes Bathsheba, that makes her complicit, that portrays her as anything other than a victim of a king and his power, any portrayal that doesn't show her as that victim is a terrible, terrible reading of Scripture. She is not complicit. She does not participate in this in any way, shape, or form. We cannot blame the victim. We ought not to do it at any time. She should be safe on her rooftop to bathe. It was a private place. There was no view of it from anywhere other than the king's palace, and David should not have been there in the first place. Bathsheba is not the only victim of David's power. Her husband will end up falling on the field of battle, caused by a conspiracy that David launches to try to do away with him and get him out of the way. That conspiracy will involve other people in David's selfish attempt to have whatever he wants and to cover up his misdeeds and his sins so that he is not held responsible or seen in that light. There's a lot for us to think about in this passage. The way we view others, the way we add hurt and harm to people who have already been victimized, the way we excuse those who we favor, the way we excuse those who are in power, the way our memory and nostalgia paints a golden age that often isn't very accurate and isn't telling the truth about the way things really were and who was harmed. And these are all themes that are not just ancient, but they show up in our own lives and in our world today. And they're important to think about and discuss, and to find a way as people of faith to talk about these things and to live in the world in a way that is different, that is less in line with David at his worst and more in line with David's descendant, Jesus the Christ. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your thoughts. Thanks for joining this important conversation. And I look forward to all those ways we will continue to talk together and think together and strive to live the way of Jesus together.